The sun rose slowly over the small village of Emeka. Birds chirped in the baobab trees as people hurried to the farms. In a small mud house on the edge of the village, Lilian sat on a wooden stool, staring at her father's wrinkled face. His eyes, once full of kindness, now seemed cold and distant. She missed the days when they laughed together, but everything changed after her father became rich overnight. Years ago, their family had been poor. They had just enough food to eat, and Lilian loved her simple life. But one stormy night, she overheard her parents arguing. Her mother's voice was shaky. "We cannot keep doing this, Nkem," she said. "It's wrong." Her father's reply sent chills down Lilian's spine. "Do you want us to go back to suffering? The sacrifices are worth it. We need this wealth." At first, Lilian didn't understand what they meant. But as the years passed, strange things happened. Her mother grew quieter, her shoulders always heavy with sadness. Lilian was their only child, and she longed for a sibling to play with. Yet, every time her mother got pregnant, the baby never came. The villagers whispered that something was wrong. One evening, while fetching water from the stream, Lilian met Obi, a boy with bright eyes and a quick smile. He helped her carry her heavy pot and made her laugh with his silly jokes. Over time, they became close friends. Obi noticed Lilian's sadness one day and asked, "Why do you look so worried?" She hesitated but decided to trust him. "My father is hiding something. I don't know what, but it makes my mother cry every night. I feel like there's a dark cloud over our home." Obi frowned. "Maybe we can figure it out together. Two heads are better than one, right?" Lilian nodded, grateful for his support. But deep down, she wondered if some secrets were too dangerous to uncover. Weeks later, Lilian stumbled upon an old chest in her father's room. Curiosity burned inside her. She knew she shouldn't, but she opened it anyway. Inside was a small, carved statue, covered in dried red stains. Beside it lay a stack of papers filled with strange symbols. Her heart raced as she heard footsteps approaching. She quickly closed the chest and pretended to sweep the floor. Her father entered the room, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here, Lilian?" he asked sternly. "Just cleaning, Papa," she replied, trying to sound calm. He didn't seem convinced, but he said nothing more and left. That night, Lilian couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the statue and the papers. She had to know the truth, no matter what it cost. The next day, she told Obi everything. Together, they decided to follow her father the next time he left the house late at night. They hid behind a tree and watched as he walked into the forest, carrying a sack. Lilian's heart pounded as they crept after him. The forest was dark and full of strange sounds. Finally, they reached a clearing where her father knelt before a fire. He placed the sack on the ground and began chanting words Lilian didn't understand. Obi tugged her arm. "We should go. This isn't safe," he whispered. But Lilian couldn't move. She watched as her father opened the sack and pulled out something small and lifeless. Her stomach churned when she realized it was a tiny goat. Her father placed the goat on the ground and raised a knife. Lilian looked away, tears streaming down her face. When the chanting stopped, they ran back to the village, their breaths loud in the still night. The next morning, Lilian confronted her mother. "Mama, what is Papa doing in the forest?" she asked. Her mother froze, her eyes filling with tears. "You weren't supposed to know," she whispered. "Know what?" Lilian pressed. Her mother sighed deeply. "Your father made a deal with a spirit to gain wealth. But the spirit demanded a terrible price, our unborn children." Lilian gasped, her heart breaking. "You mean, all my siblings?" Her mother nodded, sobbing. "I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. Now the spirit has cursed us. It won't stop until it gets what it wants." Lilian felt a surge of anger. How could her father do such a thing? She decided then and there that she would find a way to end the curse, even if it meant risking her own life. Obi promised to help her. Together, they visited the village elder, an old woman named Mema Efima, known for her wisdom. After listening to their story, Mema Efima shook her head. "Breaking a spirit's curse is no small task," she said. "You will need courage, faith, and a pure heart. But beware, The spirit will not let you go easily. Lilian nodded, determination burning in her chest. She would not let her father's greed destroy their family any longer. Mema Ifema gave them a small clay pot filled with white chalk and a woven bag containing herbs. You must find the sacred tree in the forest, she said. It's where your father made the pact. Draw a circle around it with this chalk and sprinkle these herbs. The spirit will appear, but beware, it will try to trick you. Speak boldly, and don't let fear take hold. Lilian clutched the bag tightly, her hands trembling. Obi noticed and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're not alone. We'll face this together, he said with a smile. That night, Lilian and Obi ventured into the forest. The air was heavy, and the chirping of crickets felt distant, as if even nature was holding its breath. They walked for what felt like hours before they reached a clearing where a giant Iroko tree stood tall. Its roots curled like claws, and its branches seemed to reach for the stars. This must be it, Lilian whispered. Obi helped her draw the chalk circle around the tree and sprinkle the herbs. As soon as the last leaf touched the ground, a cold wind swept through the forest. The fireflies that had lit their path disappeared, and the night seemed darker than ever. A low, guttural laugh echoed around them. Who dares disturb me? A voice boomed. Lilian swallowed hard but stepped forward. I am Lilian, daughter of Nkem. I know of the deal you made with my father. I have come to end it. The spirit emerged from the shadows, its form shifting between a man and a creature with glowing red eyes. It towered over them, its voice dripping with malice. End the deal? Foolish child. Your father's greed cannot be undone so easily. The price has already been paid. But the price is wrong, Lilian shouted, her voice trembling but firm. You've taken my siblings, my family's peace. What will it take to end this curse? The spirit laughed again, its form flickering like a flame. You think you can bargain with me? Very well. If you wish to end the curse, you must give me something greater than what I've already taken. Obi grabbed Lilian's arm. Don't listen to it. Spirits always lie. But Lilian stood her ground. What do you want? She asked. The spirit leaned closer, its breath cold against her skin. Your life, little girl. If you offer yourself to me, I will release your family from the curse. Obi gasped. No, Lilian. There has to be another way. Tears filled Lilian's eyes. The thought of giving up her life terrified her, but she couldn't bear to let her family suffer any longer. She turned to Obi, her voice soft but resolute. If this is what it takes, I'm willing to do it. Before she could step forward, Obi shouted, Wait. He pulled out a small object from his pocket, a wooden carving of a lion. This was my grandmother's, he said. She told me it had the power to protect against evil spirits. The spirit recoiled slightly at the sight of the carving. What is that? It hissed. Obi held it high. If you release the curse, we'll leave you in peace. If not, this will banish you forever. The spirit growled, its form flickering wildly. You dare threaten me? The ground shook, and the tree's branches creaked ominously. But Lilian, emboldened by Obi's courage, stepped forward. You have no power over us anymore. Release my family, or face the consequences. The spirit let out a terrible scream, and the wind swirled around them. But then, just as suddenly, the forest fell silent. The spirit's voice softened, almost sad. Very well, it said. The curse is lifted. But remember, the greed of man always comes at a cost. The spirit vanished, and the air grew still. Lilian and Obi collapsed to the ground, their hearts racing. When they returned to the village, Lilian's father was waiting for them, his face pale. What have you done? He demanded. I've set us free, Lilian replied. The curse is over, Papa. No more sacrifices. Nkem fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. I only wanted to give you a better life, he whispered. Lilian knelt beside him, her voice firm but kind. A better life doesn't come from hurting others. We'll rebuild together, as a family. Her father nodded, his guilt weighing heavily on him. But the next morning, strange things began happening in the village. Livestock went missing, crops wilted overnight, and whispers of another curse spread like wildfire. Lilian couldn't shake the spirit's final words: the greed of man always comes at a cost. Had they truly broken the curse, or had they unleashed something worse? The village grew restless as the strange events continued. Farmers woke to find their yam fields barren, and the village's once bustling market was filled with whispers. Everyone looked to the sky for answers, but the clouds remained silent. Lilian couldn't sleep. She sat by the small window of her room, staring at the dark horizon. Obi's words from earlier that day echoed in her mind: maybe the spirit left something behind, something it didn't want us to find. The next morning, Lilian decided to return to Memar Ifema. Obi came along, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a somber look. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" he asked as they walked along the narrow path leading to the elder's home. "We don't have a choice," Lilian replied. "If we don't figure this out, the whole village will suffer." When they arrived, Memar Ifema was already outside, crushing herbs in a mortar. She looked up and frowned. "I had a feeling you'd be back," she said. Lilian wasted no time. "The curse is supposed to be lifted, but things are getting worse. The spirit said something about the cost of greed. What does it mean?" Memar Ifema sighed and wiped her hands on her wrapper. "The spirit's words are never simple," she said. "But sometimes, the curse isn't just on one person. It spreads, like roots under the ground. If the spirit's deal involved more than just your father, the curse could affect the entire village." Lilian's heart sank. "So, what do we do?" Memar Ifema thought for a moment. "There is one thing," she said slowly. "But it's dangerous. You must find the bloodstone. It's an ancient gem hidden deep within the forest. The spirit left it behind as a source of its power. If you destroy it, the curse will break completely. But beware, the forest will not let you take it easily." Obi looked skeptical. "How do we even find this bloodstone?" Memar Ifema handed them a bundle of herbs and a small gourd filled with oil. "These will guide you. Follow the light of the fireflies, they will lead you to the stone. But you must move quickly. The longer you wait, the stronger the curse will grow." Lilian nodded, her resolve firm. "We'll do it." That evening, they ventured back into the forest. The air was heavier than before, and the sounds of the night felt eerie. Lilian clutched the bundle of herbs tightly, while Obi held the gourd. "Do you think this will work?" Obi asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It has to," Lilian replied. As they walked, the fireflies appeared, glowing softly in the darkness. They seemed to dance, forming a trail that led deeper into the forest. The path was winding, and the trees grew thicker, their roots twisting like snakes. Hours passed, and the fireflies finally stopped at a small clearing. In the center was a large stone, glowing faintly red. The bloodstone. Lilian stepped forward, but as soon as she did, the ground trembled. From the shadows, figures emerged, tall, twisted creatures with glowing eyes and sharp claws. "Protect the stone," they growled in unison. Obi grabbed Lilian's arm. "We need a plan." Lilian remembered the herbs Memar Ifema had given them. "The herbs. Use the herbs." They quickly scattered the herbs around the clearing, creating a barrier. The creatures hissed and backed away, unable to cross the line. Lilian approached the stone, her heart pounding. "How do we destroy it?" she asked. Obi held up the gourd of oil. "Maybe this will work." Lilian poured the oil over the bloodstone, and it began to sizzle and crack. The creatures howled in pain, their forms flickering like shadows in the firelight. With a final burst of courage, Lilian grabbed a rock and smashed the bloodstone. It shattered into pieces, and a blinding light filled the clearing. The creatures vanished, and the forest grew silent once more. When they returned to the village, the changes were immediate. Crops began to grow again, and the villagers' livestock returned. People cheered, calling Lilian and Obi heroes. But Lilian couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard a faint whisper: "You may have won this time, but the spirit's mark remains." She sat up, her heart racing. Was it over, or had they only delayed something worse? The whisper haunted Lilian throughout the night. She tossed and turned, her mind racing with questions. What did the spirit mean by the mark remains? Had destroying the bloodstone truly ended the curse, or had it unleashed something worse? The next morning, Lilian found Obi waiting for her outside her house. His usually cheerful face was clouded with concern. "I heard something last night," he said, glancing nervously at the forest. "A loud cry coming from the trees. It didn't sound human." Lilian shivered but forced herself to stay calm. "Maybe it's just an animal," she said, though she didn't believe her own words. The villagers were bustling as usual, but there was an unease in the air. The market was quieter, and people avoided talking about the strange events of the past few days. Lilian and Obi decided to visit Mama Ifema again. The old woman greeted them with a grim expression. "I felt it too," she said before they even spoke. "The spirit may be gone, but its presence has left a scar on this land." "What do we do now?" Lilian asked, her voice trembling. Mama Ifema handed her a small clay bowl filled with ash. "This is the mark seeker. It will reveal traces of the spirit's lingering power. You must sprinkle it where the bloodstone was destroyed and follow where it leads." Lilian nodded, though fear gripped her heart. Obi placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've come this far. We'll see it through." That evening, they returned to the clearing where the bloodstone once glowed. The forest seemed quieter than before, as if it, too, was holding its breath. Lilian sprinkled the ash in a circle, just as Mama Ifema instructed. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, faint glowing lines appeared on the ground, stretching out like veins of light. The lines formed a path, leading deeper into the forest. "Are we really going to follow this?" Obi asked, his voice low. "We have to," Lilian replied. They followed the glowing path for hours, the forest growing darker and denser around them. The air felt heavier with every step. Suddenly, the path ended at the base of a massive tree larger and older than any they had ever seen. Its bark was blackened, and strange symbols were carved into it, glowing faintly in the dark. "This must be where the spirit's power was rooted," Obi whispered. Lilian approached the tree, her heart pounding. As she reached out to touch the bark, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The symbols glowed brighter, and a voice boomed from the tree itself. "You dare disturb the sacred roots of power," the voice growled. The tree began to shift and move, its branches twisting into long, claw-like arms. A face appeared in the trunk, its eyes burning like embers. "You destroyed the bloodstone," the spirit snarled. "But you cannot destroy me. I am bound to this land, as you are bound to your bloodline." Lilian stepped back, her mind racing. The spirit wasn't fully gone, it had anchored itself to the land. She looked at Obi, who was clutching the carving of the lion his grandmother had given him. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice shaking. Lilian remembered Mama Ifema's words, "The greed of man always comes at a cost." Her father's deal had bound their family to this curse. If she wanted to end it, she had to sever the connection completely. She took the carving from Obi and held it out toward the tree. "We will end this," she said firmly. The spirit roared, its voice shaking the forest. "You cannot end what was never meant to be undone." The carving began to glow, and the tree's movements slowed. Lilian felt a surge of energy pass through her, as if the carving was pulling power from the spirit. "You think this will save you," the spirit hissed. "Your family's greed has left a mark that can never be erased. Destroy me, and the land itself will suffer." Lilian hesitated. Could she risk the spirit's warning? If the land was tied to the spirit's power, what would happen if it was destroyed? Obi's voice broke through her thoughts. "Whatever happens, we can't let this curse continue." "Do it, Lilian." With tears streaming down her face, Lilian pressed the carving into the tree's glowing symbols. The forest erupted in light, and the spirit's scream echoed across the land. When the light faded, the tree was gone, leaving only a charred circle of earth. Lilian and Obi collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Back in the village, the changes were immediate. The crops flourished, the livestock thrived, and the unease that had gripped the people disappeared. But Lilian knew their victory had come at a price. As she stood at the edge of the forest, she felt a strange emptiness in her chest. The spirit's final words haunted her, The greed of man always comes at a cost. What had they unleashed by breaking the spirit's hold? And what price would they pay for their freedom? Days passed, and the village seemed to return to normal. Farmers sang as they worked, and the market was lively again. Yet, Lilian felt no peace. At night, she still heard faint whispers in the wind, voices calling her name. Obi tried to cheer her up, but she knew deep down that their battle wasn't truly over. One evening, her father, Nkem, approached her. His face was pale, and his hands trembled as he held a wooden stool to sit beside her. "Lilian, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She stiffened but nodded. "What is it, Papa?" "When I made the deal with the spirit, it wasn't just for our family's wealth. The spirit demanded something more. It demanded loyalty. I was meant to serve it for the rest of my life." He paused, his eyes filling with tears. "But when you destroyed the bloodstone and broke the pact, it left me. I can feel its anger still lingering, searching for a way back." Lilian's stomach churned. "What do you mean, a way back?" Her father looked away, ashamed. "If the spirit cannot use me, it will find another. It may even come for you." That night, Lilian couldn't sleep. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Could the spirit truly come for her? As she stared at the ceiling, a sudden knock startled her. She rushed to the door and found Obi standing there, panting and wide-eyed. "Lilian," he gasped. "It's back." "What do you mean?" she asked, pulling him inside. Obi held up his grandmother's lion carving, now cracked and dull. "I was keeping this by my bed, and it shattered on its own. Then I saw it, Lilian. A shadow, standing at the edge of my house, staring at me. It didn't move, but I could feel its eyes burning into me." Lilian's heart raced. "We have to go back to Mama Efima. Now." They ran through the village, the cool night air biting at their skin. When they reached Mama Efima's hut, the elder was already awake, sitting outside as if she had been waiting for them. "You felt it too, didn't you?" she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Lilian and Obi nodded. "What can we do?" Lilian asked desperately. Mama Efima sighed. "The spirit is angry because it lost its anchor. It's untethered now, searching for a new one. If your father's bloodline is tied to the curse, then you may be its next target." Lilian's throat tightened. "How do we stop it?" "There's only one way," Mama Efima said. "You must sever the bond completely. To do that, you must confront the spirit in its true form, where it is weakest, its realm. But entering its realm requires a sacrifice." Obi stiffened. "What kind of sacrifice?" Mama Efima's gaze softened, though her eyes were full of sorrow. "A part of yourself. Your strength, your memories, even your life. The spirit will demand something from you before it lets you leave." The thought of entering the spirit's realm terrified Lilian, but she knew she had no choice. The next night, armed with only Mama Efima's guidance, she and Obi returned to the forest. The charred circle where the tree had once stood seemed darker than before, as if it absorbed the moonlight. Mama Efima had given them a small vial of red powder. "Sprinkle this on the ground," she had said. "It will open the portal, but be warned you cannot stay there long, or you may never return." Lilian sprinkled the powder, and the earth began to glow. A swirling vortex of light and shadows appeared, its pull strong and relentless. She turned to Obi, her heart pounding. "Are you sure you want to do this with me?" Obi smiled faintly. "You didn't think I'd let you go alone, did you?" Taking a deep breath, they stepped into the vortex. The world around them twisted and shifted. They found themselves in a strange, desolate land. The sky was a deep red, and the ground was black and cracked like burnt clay. In the distance, a towering figure loomed, its body made of swirling shadows, its glowing eyes fixed on them. "So, you've come to face me," the spirit growled, its voice echoing like thunder. "You cannot undo what has been done." "We're not here to undo anything," Lilian said, her voice steady despite her fear. "We're here to end this. For good." The spirit laughed, the sound rumbling through the air. "You think you have the strength to defeat me? You are mere mortals, bound by fear and weakness." Lilian gripped Obi's hand tightly. "We may be weak, But we are not afraid of you anymore. The spirit's form began to shift, growing larger and more menacing. If you wish to end this, then you must prove your worth. Offer me your sacrifice, and perhaps I shall spare your village. Lilian stepped forward, her heart pounding. What do you want? The spirit leaned closer, its glowing eyes narrowing. Give me your memories of your mother. The love you felt for her, the laughter you shared, it will all be mine. Lilian froze. Her mother was her anchor, the one who had given her strength during the hardest times. Losing those memories felt like losing a part of herself. Obi stepped forward, his jaw clenched. Take my strength instead. Leave her memories alone. The spirit laughed cruelly. Ah, the noble friend. Very well, I shall take both. Unless, of course, you choose to leave now and let your village suffer. The decision hung heavy in the air. Lilian and Obi exchanged a glance, knowing that whatever choice they made would change their lives forever.